In this video, we're going to take a look at the 2024 electoral map in Donald Trump's best case scenario, as the former president continues to lead in national polling over Joe Biden, as he has done consistently since October of last year. This begs the question, just how well can Trump do if he continues to dominate the 2024 election cycle? And so in this video, we're going to take a look at what a 2024 Trump landslide would look like. We'll begin by filling in the solid states for both candidates. Even if Joe Biden gets destroyed in a landslide, there are still a few states where he is still going to win by a margin of 12 percentage points or more, and these states include California, Hawaii, his home state of Delaware, Maryland, the District of Columbia, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, as well as the 1st District of Maine, giving him 93 electoral votes. As for Trump, he's going to easily capture states in the middle of the country that have reliably voted Republican for decades. He's going to win all of Nebraska with the exception of the 2nd District, which we'll cover later, as well as nearly the entirety of the Deep South. So these are essentially the states that you would typically expect Trump to win by a solid margin, 122 electoral votes at the very minimum. However, in a best case scenario, we're going to include states such as Iowa and Ohio, two states where Trump is polling very well in. In Ohio, the former president leads Biden by 10%, and in Iowa, he's ahead by nearly 12. And so these two states were pretty competitive just a decade ago. In 2012, they went to Barack Obama by narrow margins, but in 2016, Trump flipped them, and they've been Republican states ever since. In a best case scenario, there's no doubt that Trump is going to win both of these Midwestern states by solid 12-point margins. We see a similar story in Florida as well. This used to be the king of battleground states, but now it's a pretty Republican state after Trump's two victories in 2016 and 2020, and in the 2022 midterms. Florida was one of the reddest states in the entire country, voting for Marco Rubio and Ron DeSantis by nearly 20-point margins. So Florida is undoubtedly going to be solid, even in a regular scenario. Just based on the polling right now, Trump is already leading Biden by 9 points on average, and the fact that we don't even have that many polls from the Sunshine State shows you just how uncompetitive it is going to be this cycle. And the final solid red state will be Texas, 40 electoral votes, a state Trump didn't really perform that well in 2020. He only won it by just a little bit over 5 points, but in 2024 he's going to win it by nearly 10, and in a best case scenario he'll surely be able to carry the state by more than 12. Before we continue, only 3% of you guys are subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more consistent political content leading up to the 2024 election. Moving on to the likely states, these states are still going to be rather competitive, but one candidate will have a clear advantage. And so starting off with the likely blue states for Joe Biden, we have Washington and Oregon. These two states may be closer, but they are still going to go to the incumbent president. Biden won both of them by less than 20 points, and considering the unfavorable polling we've seen for Biden coming out of these two states recently, it is no surprise that they're both in the likely Democratic column. We also have the state of Illinois, a state that Democrats haven't been too solid in for quite a while. Yes, they're still ahead. Yes, Illinois is still by far a blue state, but it really isn't what it used to be. Chicago's population isn't able to keep up with the growing number of Republicans in Illinois, and so at some point the state is going to become rather competitive, just like the rest of the upper Midwest. And then on the East Coast, we have New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey, the three states in the tri-state area. Many Democratic leaders in these states have just been very disappointing. They've really hurt the popularity of Democrats in general. We had Andrew Cuomo, who resigned for sexual harassment as governor of New York, and then Bob Menendez in New Jersey, who is currently a senator that has come under fire for multiple accusations and multiple convictions for bribery charges. And so in all three of these states, Democrats are facing an uphill battle. In New York, the incumbent president is only leading by 10 points, 9 points in the most recent polling, and in the only poll that we have out of New Jersey, the incumbent president is only ahead by 7%. And so with all of the likely and solid states filled in, Biden is at 181 electoral votes. As for Trump, we only have two likely states, and they will be North Carolina and Georgia. Both of these states were very close in the last two elections. In 2020, Georgia was actually the closest state in the entire election, going to Biden by 1/5 of a percentage point. In North Carolina, Trump actually won it by 1.3%. And this is really surprising because in 2016, Clinton lost Georgia by 5.1, but she only lost North Carolina by 3.7. For a while, it has been thought that North Carolina has been the more liberal out of the two, but the 2020 election proved otherwise. The last time a Democrat won North Carolina was all the way back in 2008 with the election of Barack Obama. Before this, you'd have to go all the way back to 1976 and Jimmy Carter, while in Georgia, Biden's victory in 2020 was the first in nearly 30 years. So both states are still relatively competitive, but in the 2024 election, due to Joe Biden's unpopularity, Donald Trump is on track to easily winning these states, even if it's not his best case scenario. He leads by 7.5 points in the Tar Heel state, while in the Peach state, Trump is up by 6.4. So undoubtedly, North Carolina and Georgia are going to be likely Republican states, and this will put Trump up at 251 electoral votes. Now, as for the lean states, we only have one for Biden, but quite a few for Trump. And so for Biden, we have the state of Colorado, 10 electoral votes. It went to him by 14 points in 2020, but now Biden leads by less than 6 in the polling average, and that's going to be the only lean Democratic state, and this is going to be a rather realistic scenario, so this is something that really could happen, and so this is the Trump's best case scenario within the bounds of reason. And so for Trump, his lean states include both Nevada and Arizona. Nevada would be a flip. This is a state he hasn't won in either 2016 or 2020. Both times, Democrats won them by 2.4 percentage points, while Arizona went to Trump by 3.5 in 2016, and in 2020, Biden won it by 0.31. And with Kari Lake on the ballot in Arizona, she simply isn't the best candidate. She's rather unpopular. That's going to drag Trump down in the state, and so that's why I have it in the lean Republican column, but it's going to be around a 4 to 5 point margin in Trump's best case scenario, so really, it's not too far off from what we're seeing in North Carolina or Georgia, but it's a victory for the former president nonetheless. We'll also be giving Trump nearly the entirety of the former blue wall. The three states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania were very reliably blue states throughout the 1990s and the early 2000s, and they essentially helped many Democratic presidents get into office. Go back to 1992, the blue wall formed under Bill Clinton after George H.W. Bush won most of it in 1988. In 1996, they were all blue. Even in 2000, Al Gore won all three states. Same thing for John Kerry in 2004, even though he lost the popular vote. This is the worst performance for a Democrat since the election of 2000. And then in 2008, Obama, of course, won them all easily. Michigan went to him by 16 points. Just 8 years later, by the end of Obama's term, Trump flips all three of these states. They all became red for the first time since 1992 in Michigan and Pennsylvania, and for the first time since 1988 in Wisconsin. In 2020, Biden wins the election and very narrowly takes these three states back, but in 2024, it's pretty likely that he's going to lose at least one of them. If he loses the election, he's probably going to lose all three of them, and of course, in Trump's best case scenario, all of these states are going to be red. In Wisconsin, the former president leads by a little over 1 point in the five-way polling average, but he's been ahead throughout the entirety of the cycle. Joe Biden was supposed to win Wisconsin by 7 points, according to the polling in 2020. He only won it by 0.63. Trump did better in Wisconsin in 2016 than Biden did in 2020, and so Wisconsin is going to be a red state in 2024. So will Michigan. This is typically the most liberal out of these three upper blue wall states, and in the five-way polling average, Biden does have a very slight lead of 0.3%. However, going through the election, Trump's numbers are probably going to go up as they have in the last two election cycles, and on top of that, in Trump's best case scenario, there's no doubt he's going to win the Wolverine state. And finally, in the Keystone state of Pennsylvania, 19 electoral votes, the biggest prize in the Midwest now, tied with Illinois. Illinois, Trump leads by 2 points in the polling average. A state Biden won by just over 1% in the last election. Pennsylvania is on track to going red as well, and this puts Trump at 312 electoral votes. He'll be up at 313 with the addition of the 2nd District of Nebraska that he's going to win back after Biden took it in 2020. And so we now have just 5 states left. These are all going to be tilt states, decided by margins less than 1%. So starting off with New Mexico, it's going to be a tilt Democratic state. Biden might have won it by 10 points in 2020, but that margin is going to go down in 2024. New Mexico is the only state with a Hispanic majority, and that group over the last few years has taken a huge step to the right. And so Democrats simply won't be able to hold on to their solid margins in the state for much longer. Up in Minnesota, though, the state is on track to flipping red, even if we're not in Trump's best case scenario, because Joe Biden is performing pretty poorly in Minnesota. He only leads by 2 points in the polling. This is well within the margin of error. Minnesota could go red, even in one of the most realistic scenarios. And when you look at just how long Minnesota's been a blue state, it has the longest Democratic voting streak. The last time a Republican won Minnesota was all the way back in 1972. 1976 and onwards, Minnesota has always been a blue state, even in Ronald Reagan's landslide in 1984. It was the only blue state on the map that voted for Walter Mondale. So this flip is going to be a pretty momentous occasion for Republicans. We also have a flip incoming in Virginia, 13 electoral votes. Biden won this state by 10 points. But what's different about Virginia is that just 1 year after Biden's election in 2021, Glenn Youngkin, a Republican, was elected governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia over Terry McAuliffe, who is actually a former governor of the state. And so Virginia can definitely get close, and with polling only having Biden up by 4 points, this is once again within the margin of error, and it is definitely possible that Trump actually flips Virginia. This is one of the states that he said his campaign is targeting, and if he puts enough effort into winning it, there's a pretty good chance that Virginia also flips red. And to finish off the 2 northeastern states of New Hampshire and Maine, I'm going to start off by giving Biden the Granite State of New Hampshire. It can get very close like we saw in 2016 when Trump only lost it by less than half of a percentage point. This was really quite an impressive margin. In 2020, though, Biden won the state by 7.4. He did quite well. He's also doing quite well in the polling right now, 8%, but New Hampshire does have a history of making big swings, and so it can definitely go down to a 1-point margin. That's why I have New Hampshire as being tilt Democrat in Trump's best case scenario. And finally, I will give Donald Trump the state of Maine by a tilt margin. He's actually polling very well in the state. According to the latest poll, he's on track to winning it by 6%. An older poll from last year, this is when Biden was performing better in national polling, he actually was only ahead by 1%. So the polling right now favors Trump in Maine. This is one of the states he wants to target as well, just like Minnesota and Virginia, as well as New Mexico. And it's definitely possible if he puts in enough resources. And so right now, in Trump's most realistic best case scenario, he will win 338 electoral votes to Joe Biden's 200. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like this video down below if you enjoyed it. Subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to November. And comment down below how many electoral votes do you think Trump can win in his best case scenario.